are kicking off this episode today with some fresh and full cups of Breve lattes. Breve short for Breve latte, and Breve means a lot more to us. Oh no, Cullen stole the. So you could sneak over, and take care of it. You guys, so if you've ever trained around us, you've been around the gym, then maybe you've caught wind of the Breve lore. So the Breve culture is something that has existed with us really since the get-go. There's some stories that come from it, but really it's a representation of sort of our culture and how we interact, how we prefer to train, and it has some really cool story behind it that can help you develop a training mindset or understand our training mindsets a little bit better too. So we're going to tell that story today, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about travel, because travel comes closely with training, parkour, and the way that we train and the way we improved. And if you've ever traveled before, you can grow so much from traveling. Other than we talked about video being a great hack for sort of increasing the velocity of how fast you learn and sort of skip leveling. Travel is I would say more powerful than that even, right? Would you say?
It can be. Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you do it right.
If it's impactful enough, it creates some opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it can also just be like a great waste of your time if you're not doing it right. But it's always fun. It's always fun.
If you travel and then you don't, and then you just do the same thing you did before you left, then yeah.
Yes.
If you go somewhere else just to watch Netflix.
I feel like the whole purpose for traveling and parkour is that you're trying to stretch your wings a little bit, so to speak, right? So you're out there with new people who train differently, who have a different training mindset than you, and are probably better at some things than you are. And your whole goal should be to go out there and be like, kind of like when you came out to Colorado, when you first moved out here.
Yeah.
You're like, who's good at what, and how can I jump in on that, right? Like, that's what you should be doing if you travel for parkour. Is like, who's good at what? Oh, I know these guys are like back in the day, Dylan, Brandon, and Knox were well-known, very renowned for swinging, right? For their bar skills. And so, if I went down to Boulder and I was training with them, I was like, I want to do swings with these guys. Because, that's what these guys are really, really good at. And this is something that I'm not super good at.
And also, they were big into travel. I mean...
They were.
What happened, highly underrated, what just recently released on YouTube, it was only a year or two ago that Brandon, this is well after they'd shot it.
Is it the Helms Deeper? Did it finally come out? Because I haven't. This is a shout out now. Brandon, Dylan, Dante, or Knox, if one of you guys are watching this, I'm still waiting for that Helms Deeper video.
Oh, Dante's always watching. He's always watching us. I feel like Dante might be somewhat of a spirit guide for us, because anytime I'm pushing content out, he'll chime in and be like, "What's up, guys?" Or when we do something, he travels up here. All the comps we did.
That's true.
I think we under-recognize Dante in our culture, because he anytime we've had a comp, he's been here. He's been training. He's participated. He's oftentimes won, and then been "Oh, that was a great experience," and it just made me feel okay, cool. We're doing the right thing, right?
Ross has also been the same way.
Ross, yeah.
And they were actually just down, right?
They were just training with him. Yep.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
When?
I know he didn't. I think it was on Monday.
What do you mean? 2
It
days
was on
ago?
Monday they came down, and he didn't even message me.
And
I mean, it was my anniversary.
You're totally right. He's the spirit. He's up here, just man, you guys, we know you guys got your stuff together, dude. You guys just do so much for us all. And we were talking about comps too, and he was just oh yes, the great destroyer of athletes. That's what he called comps. And I immediately knew what he meant. I've gotten hurt in a comp. I remember I got hurt in my first or my second trip to APC, doing a dive roll, and I didn't even get to do my event. So I'm yes. The great destroyer is the
great destroyer.
Dude,
it can wreck you. Man.
Yeah, the number of times I've been at a comp where I'm hey, you running? And they're yeah. And then an hour later, post warm-ups, they're not running because during warm-ups they were I think this is, they're trying some route or whatever, and then they end up rolling an ankle, clipping a hip or something like that, and then it's when the comp is right there, there's only so much adrenaline can push you through, and with the way that parkour is right now, and that nobody's getting really paid for these comps, Like,
Yeah, no, not comparatively.
nobody's
No.
like, no man, I kind of broke my ankle, but I'm still gonna run this comp anyways. Like football players can do that because they have like a $70 million contract, you know?
Right.
And they can be like, you know what? I'm gonna play anyways,
Yeah.
right? And like the PT
Yeah,
is
just
like,
hit
I
the
can't
PT,
really
like-
stop you because you're 6'4" and 300 pounds, but I wouldn't recommend it. But like for parkour athletes, like guys, that's not worth it. Like if you get hurt, warm ups, you could just call it.
Yeah,
It's okay.
I'm pretty
it's
sure
all right. Come back next year.
that the PT is in the back and they're like, what's the ROI on this guy? Give him the medicine.
Oh, dude, yeah, and they're definitely just like,
You're like, how's your knee feel? Great. Well, it might fall off tomorrow, but you're playing today.
but you still got 2 hours worth of game to
Right,
go. So.
right, exactly. That's so true. I mean,
The
yeah.
Great Destroyer.
The Great Destroyer. We said that. He said that too because it was just when we had done the comp that was local here. He had come out of Red Bull Art of Motion, and I was like, oh man, it was so frustrating. This was like one of my first. We put this comp on, what 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago even maybe now. And out of like the qualifier, I like slip off the box and like and like roundhouse kick this like rail.
Oh, I remember that.
And then I had that like knot,
That's a
and I
nasty
was
one.
like, no, I'm still competing the next day. So I just like compressed it and then laid back on the wall to get the fluid out of my knee to come up my leg, and then ran the comp and did well. I was proud of myself. But then 5 days later, I'm in urgent care, and the nurse who just is like some sort of like she just wanted to like do surgery and experiment. She's like, well, if I cut it out, it'll heal faster. And I'm just like, okay. And then she's just like, and they're scooping
it
out
was-
the dry blood.
I remember looking at that thing.
Disgusting.
That was
Yeah, it
disgusting.
absolutely
Yeah.
needed
It was
to be
definitely like
have a
people
scar.
say like, oh,
vivisected. That
people
thing,
are
dude.
like, oh yeah, like
it this
he
one?
he hit his thing and he
Yeah, it was this
had
one,
this
yeah.
like welt on there that was like the size of a baseball, and normally that's like a a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's not actually the size of a baseball. Yours was legitimately like a lacrosse ball, the half
Yeah.
a lacrosse ball coming out of your shin.
Yeah.
It was disgusting, and I definitely kind of wish I was there when she sliced it open.
I have
That
video
sounds like-
of it,
Oh.
or at least
now
pictures.
now that you say it, I don't know if I
I
actually
see
want
it.
to.
I'll send the
I
pictures.
just like
to
the
you.
idea of seeing it.
I'll send the pictures over. It's in my phone somewhere.
Dude, that was gross.
But
though.
Dante said the same thing.
Yeah, he was just he's like, well, why? I was like, why did I do that? And he's like, because you're a buster. And it's just like, he's like, man, sometimes we're just busters. I know he was coming off that Red Bull Art of Motion, right? In Santini, right?
Santorini.
Santorini, right? And so he was sort of empathizing with me. I just thought it was so timely. I loved it. I loved because he
I do
didn't give
remember
me
that term too. Yeah.
he didn't give me legal Pete's. We were talking about it, and I felt like I was dwelling on it a bit. And then he had obviously just come out of this experience that was, working his life up to that event and doing training there. And I don't know if he was happy with his performance or not, but he was just such a sobering, like, yeah, dude, just a
It's
buster.
Dude, I think
Ridiculous.
that right there though is like that's some Breve culture right there. It's like sometimes you need to just know like you done messed up.
Mhm.
You're a buster, and you need to just be like, you know what, I goofed on that one.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Because you hear that a lot sometimes. Is athletes will train and they'll do something, like whether it's filming a line or competing or just training on their own, and they'll be like, oh, I know, I think I could have done that, or this angle's a little hard, or this surface is slick, right? When like Breve culture is like, you just own it.
Kinda, you gotta
I
own
sucked
it.
at that,
Yeah,
and that's okay.
that is okay.
You know what? I don't get these strides every time. My climb up was butt because I was weak. Own it, right? Like that's.
So I
that's
think
pretty
part
legit.
of what makes our culture interesting to some degree is a lot of times we get the I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, of course I've been thinking about it a lot. The people will say, oh, your gym it has a style slant. Like people kind of see us as oftentimes we've developed a reputation of being more into like the aesthetic side of things. Like we've had people come through
really?
trick and free running, right? And or more of a style slant. We were some of the first people to have like the spring floor and stuff like that with the air track. Well, no,
That's true.
Denver
Of
was,
an actual
had that.
parkour
yeah.
gym, you're right. Of like hybrid gyms.
Yeah.
Hybrid gyms have had spring floors. But yeah, but to be like a branded parkour gym to
Yeah.
have a spring floor, yeah, we were definitely one of the early
Which
ones.
is also unique about us too is we only operate through the lens of parkour. Like all our gym, like the Outrun gym, it's all parkour. There's no a la carte. There are complementary disciplines that come in here, but if you come and you look at our programs, it's no buffet, right?
Yeah.
It's no buffet. It's no movement buffet. But and I don't think that is because we don't like or any of the other disciplines. We're just so focused on creating the culture again, creating that wonderful creme
Sweet,
de la creme,
milky
right?
cream.
How's my pronunciation on that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Creme de la creme? Okay. Yeah, we're going for just like that creme de la creme. And it's not the egotistical best of the best. It's just, I think that what people see when they come in sometimes, they're like, oh, this is a really nice gym. There's paint. I kind of want to jump on stuff because, I don't know, that looks like a really clean, facade or something. I don't want to break it. I've heard that before too. It's finesse, I think that's really what it is. It's finesse. It's not necessarily style because we still spend, the vast majority of our time is spent on like a more traditional approach to parkour in that we're not flipping off of everything necessarily. There's not as much of a, like 80% of what we do is probably just jumping and swinging, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that we're focused on a lot of like style hype. It's finesse. I think that's what, to me, is at the center of Breve culture, is like not taking yourself too seriously, but taking what you do very seriously.
Yes. It's like you won't, well, I don't know about you two. You might see me, but you won't often see me cracking open the fridge to just chug some sweet half and half. For those of you that don't know, Breve is half and half,
right?
In like the cafe terms. But you won't see me like cracking up a carton of half and half and just like taking a sweet chug of that, okay? But you will see me very often having it in my coffee after it's been steamed. It's still half and half. It's still got all the goodness that half and half has. It's just refined.
Refined?
Right? The way that it's presented is not in its raw form.
Right.
I haven't changed what the Breve is.
Right.
And I'm not asking anybody to change who they believe they are in parkour.
Right.
But when you're ready to like present, you got to refine that a little bit, right? And you should have some pride in that too. Like if you went to a coffee shop and you were like, yo, can I get a Breve latte? And they like straight up just like, you watched him pour the half and half in there, stick the steam on, and then pop it, and then just like slap some espresso in there and slide it over. You'd be
so
like,
offended. What
is this? Where's my quarter inch of foam? You didn't even mix the espresso. Everybody knows espresso, then milk goes on top.
There's no
foam.
No arboreal reference at the top of my phone.
Yeah.
Like you didn't.
You didn't make any shapes. You didn't do nothing. You just kind of slapped them together and then.
At least give me like a goofy bear or something.
Yeah.
Some sort of animal.
But nobody's like, oh, this latte will change your life. Nobody. Well, hopefully not. Nobody's pushing you a latte and they're like, this is gonna change your life forever.
I feel like that could be that way, but I think that in the end it's just a latte, like settle down. Right? That's more the attitude. It's just like, yeah, we're trying to be the best, but don't like take that so seriously to the point where it like sort of corrodes like the culture or the experience for everybody else or the experience for yourself because you're so obsessed with an outcome. Yeah. You're just like, oh, gotta be the best at any cost. Okay. I mean, that's cool for you. I'm gonna go with you, but I might hang back just a little bit sometimes and have some Breve.
And just like take sweet time.
Yeah, if we had if we train outside and then some people will bring snacks or whatever, like we would totally be like still barefoot training. We'd literally done this, and that on the trip where the story came together, we were in the Pacific Northwest playing barefoot in the dirt, training on the trees in it's the park is it Soldier not Soldier
Monument
Park, the one in Seattle.
Yeah, it's Monument Park.
Monument Park. Yeah. And we're
the one with all the tall trees.
The tall trees, yeah,
it's Monument Park.
And we were barefoot, but then it's like, oh, we need to go get coffee, so we sit down barefoot with like, we would totally, if we were really good at this, we'd just have like a kit and press our own espresso and then steam foam it with some sort of electrical device and then just sit and have a really like dainty
Just like a Buddhist breve
A Buddhist breve, right? Like a little breve ceremony.
out in the park.
We need to develop the breve ceremony. That's a real thing because I just love how jarring and sophisticated that is as well. That's hilarious. So if anybody knows a good breve ceremony, let's do that. All right. So the metaphor, if people are like, why does it matter? Why does it coffee matter? So here's one of the reasons why it came about. Was because like everyone in parkour, we were drawn to travel, and because we knew we could learn from that sort of that journey, that hero's journey or whatever the analogous interest is for people, is we wanted to travel. But here's the parallel. Like I feel like in the fitness world, why parkour people are different, or at least our culture is different, the breve culture is different, is again this trying hard thing. It's like in fitness, it's like if you're gonna train, you're going to go out and what are you going to do? You're going to buy a bunch of gloves and then you're going to put on like really tight like spandex. And it's okay if you do this. So I'm not targeting anyone who owns gloves. All right, it's fine.
We've all done it.
We've all done it. The first thing you do is to go.
Just some of us did it before social media, and thus it's not documented.
Right, and thus it's not documented. We've all been there. And it's like they're all very prepared and everyone has like a notepad. Collins literally has a notepad right here. He's just drawing the predator, dude. He's just not even listening to the podcast. He's drawing the predator.
Hey.
Okay, so
That's pretty good though. Let me see that again.
that was good. Oh, show it on the camera so people can see that that's a quality
I don't
predator.
think that's a predator actually.
It's not.
It's not?
I'm just trying.
It has the same dreads, so you may be like racially profiling there.
No, he's like doing self-portrait with no breve.
It's
Colin without coffee, a self-portrait.
There
So
we
post that on there. So we needed, like, the next thing you do is then you go to the vitamin store and you buy like $60 pre-workout, and then you have your during workout, and you have your post-workout supplement, and you have your shaker and all these things. And again, I consume some supplements, but they're just very like geared up. And again, that's back to like almost trying a little bit too hard. So when we would travel, we'd still have the same needs. Like you need nutrition, you need caffeine, you don't need it, but we were essentially doing the same thing. It's like we're fast, we're hopping, what's around is coffee shops, and when we train outside, and in cities or in environments where you don't have the time to sit down and do a full meal thing, the fastest thing to do to get a bunch of calories was to walk into a coffee shop and order a breve, because you'd get so many calories because they're very full on calories. Like if you do a breve right, you might be hitting 800 calories, and if you're really, the only reason you wouldn't choose full cream is because that's just a little heavy when you're actually training, right?
Yeah, and usually you're training in like hot weather, so like Ron Burgundy said, milk was a bad choice.
Milk was a bad choice.
So there's a line there. Heavy whipping cream is definitely a tasty treat, but that's more of like a fall coffee drink.
Or like dessert, right? Or that's your post-workout.
That's
There's
your
your casein pre-workout before you go to bed, heavy whipping cream.
It's a winter thing for sure.
So we could get
It's like
even the
Maybe like
Italian
pumpkin
sodas.
heavy cream.
What?
breve?
The pumpkin heavy
Pumpkin
cream
latte,
breve?
heavy cream.
Oh, well then we'll have to ask what your favorite breve is. Be thinking
Yeah.
about that. So we would travel and train, and the easiest way to get calories was to pick up like a cold or a warm drink, depending on, and you just get the half and half. And if you really shouldn't be putting much sugar in there, but you get a little bit of carbs if you need like a little bit of carbs in there. They're easy to throw in. And so it's sort of this catch-all. Instead of like people doing like a protein shake or a cookie, the breve was sort of our more sort of a classier version of that, a little more sophisticated, a little more finesse, right?
Yeah.
And so but it was also a great break to stop and get coffee and enjoy that. And we don't typically drink, so like that was a good way for us to connect with people that we travel with as well, is to just have coffee, that coffee culture. And there was a little bit of caffeine in there, so you got a nice little jolt on performance, and your mental acuity was a little bit higher for a while when you're carrying around a breve. So and then you worked at coffee shops, and really, so you had some insight there, and so that was early on in the culture. We took one trip where we traveled to the West Coast, and along the way we took planes and trains, and we were drinking a lot of breve, and we were joking about how this was a cultural sort of example of us, because people at that time didn't know what breves were. It was very uncommon for us to be like, oh, I'm going to order a breve, and oftentimes you'd go into coffee shops and they wouldn't know, and still don't sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, like, if you go into a legit coffee shop, they've always known.
Right.
But, yeah,
But
if you went
back
into just kind of
then,
a run of the mill.
We're talking
ask for a
circa
breve.
2012, 2013, and and that coffee culture hadn't grown yet, so I like to think we were a little bit ahead of the curve. But again, that's the hipster sophistication coming out, right? Like we would go and we'd order these drinks, and people would ask us about them. Well, one time we were traveling by Amtrak north to British Columbia, right? So we're coming out of Seattle, headed up to BC to hit up Origins, and we go into the dining car, and we go in there, and there's this guy, and he talks to a lot of people, so he's kind of riffed in. I feel like those dining car guys on trains are like sort of super amateur like stand-up comedians, and so he takes a look at us and sort of like slightly disheveled hair, looking like super. Anyway, so he looks at us and he's like, we step up to order, and he looks at the three of us and he's like, "What are you guys, a boy band?" and and we're like, "Yeah, we're a boy band." And he's like, "Well, what's your name?" And we were like, "We're the Breve Bros." And so that was where the original Breve culture term came from, with just
Thanks, Amtrak guy.
Thanks, Amtrak
You're
guy.
the inspiration for our cultural.
So then that was a joke. We were gonna make shirts, and we were gonna do this whole like clothing line, as everyone dreams. But then realized how impractical that was. We sort of just kind of made some shirts for ourselves and whatnot. That caught on around. People thought it was cool. I think that at one point when I told this story to Brandon Douglas, he said that he had actually him and his friends had created a cappuccino crew.
Yeah.
And then they were like, "Well, we need to battle like Ron the Ocho, right? Yep. Like they need to have a battle where the cappuccino crew versus the Breve Bros." But once it got caught on here, our coaches and stuff liked it. They thought it was cool. They also like to work at coffee shops and stuff, so it really fit our culture. And we take a group picture at our old location of sort of the coaches together, and it was sort of this like Game of Thrones like mock-up picture, right?
Yeah, I don't even know how what was the premise of taking the picture. I think we just we were training and filming, and we had the camera, and we had a group picture, and it ended up we did a everybody serious one, and we just had this cool tiered group of us all standing there looking all regal. And then we looked back at the picture, and we were like, we look like Game of Thrones, like the Breve Lords.
Right, we were the Breve Lords now. We're the Lords of Breve, right? So then Breve Lords stuck. That's the one that really stuck. And then we just started making an annual shirt out of it. So
I also feel like it's better because it's it's a little more gender neutral.
Right.
I think all genders are okay with being a lord.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants to be a bro.
Yeah. And
sometimes bros don't even want to be bros.
Bros sometimes don't even want to be bros. And I do think Breve Bro was a little bro-y.
That was our boy band version.
That was the boy band version.
Stage, that was in sync, and then we broke off to be JT on his own.
That's a perfect example, because JT is a lord for sure.
Yeah.
But NSYNC is definitely bros.
Definitely some Breve bros.
Perfect analogy.
It's fine. They made music. They made money. They did their thing. But JT's music was just better when he went off on his own.
Right? It was. JT's awesome. Okay, so the favorite Breve. So if you have a Breve, everybody knows each other's order for the most part. I know you guys' order, but you guys tell me favorite Breve. Your go-to Breve. Not the favorite, because then you'll tell me something really one time, it was a full moon, and then you had the Breve and the power of the red moon went into the, what I mean? What's your go-to?
Oh, go-to is just vanilla Breve. But
yeah.
it changes
that's
every
so
season.
Vanilla, dude.
That's my
That's so vanilla.
That's my go-to when I'm not carby conscious.
That's
is
it's
Breve
pumpkin when it's fall time for sure.
Van Breve. I'm
so
straight
what?
Van Breve.
So if they were.
But yours is mocha.
Yours
is mocha, isn't it?
Yeah, mine's definitely mocha.
Yeah.
Mine's a Breve mocha through and through. Because it's a superior drink.
Why is that? See, because I like vanilla, not just because I'm pasty Breve white, but I just think that vanilla is one of those things. It's like espresso, where it's so subtle. It's a very subtle thing. I mean, assuming you go to Starbucks to get the vanilla, they put 8 douses of the vanilla flavored sugar in there. That's not really vanilla.
3, 4, 5.
I like. Wow. Wow.
3 pumps.
What's really better though is cinnamon vanilla Breve. Bindle will do it. I always forget to ask him. Just put cinnamon in your vanilla. That one's better.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, like, I usually try not to make a complicated order because I worked in a coffee shop, and even though, like, if you have a complicated order at a coffee shop, you can order it. They'll make it for you. They're gonna do it with a smile on their face. It's not like inside they're gonna be like, oh, this freaking Justin ordering his freaking double tall freaking cinnamon mocha.
Yeah.
Right. They're not gonna hate you for it. But I'm also just conscious of, like, I get it. It's back there. So I just do like a small Breve mocha. That's usually the way it goes. But if I'm feeling fancy, I want to do a Mexican mocha, which is cinnamon on top.
Oh yes.
And it's got a spice in there too. It's got chili flakes.
Yeah, if the coffee shop has it, they put a little bit of chili flakes.
Chili flakes.
That's
So what is it like? If you've known,
Yeah.
a lot of people out here they're like, wait, what? People right now, there's this whole layer of coffee I don't understand. And yes, there is such a thing as flavored coffee, but not like hazelnut Folgers, right? So if you haven't tried certain coffees, sometimes try the special coffee that the coffee shop, if it's a nicer coffee shop, they'll have like a special that they're making where they use like honey or they use something more subtle and it's not real strong. Try those out.
Honey lattes are pretty bomb.
Honey lattes are great.
They're a pain to make.
What's the one that we got? I think it's in Seattle on the Fisherman's Wharf, like the one wharf. Yeah, next. What?
Now we're talking
Sounds
about
like a
dogs
Halo Elite.
Wharf. It's next to the first ever Starbucks or whatever. There's a shop.
The Pikes Peak Market.
The Pikes Peak Market, and then there's a shop
Pikes
right there.
Market, yeah.
And I swear, maybe it is a Mexican mocha. I think it
Probably,
might
yeah.
actually was a
That
Mexican
sounds
mocha.
familiar.
And that was probably just because the whole experience. I was traveling at the time, and I think I was really hungry. We just had a meal, and the essence of that really cool spot, iconic spot in Seattle, mixed with the just amazing coffee. Yeah, you can be really good, but you can't go too sweet.
No, you can't. I'm gonna dig in a little bit because I think the Breve vanilla latte is like.
I think it's
kind
like
of boring, guys.
No.
I gotta be honest.
It's like vanilla. If you get really good vanilla, is it's kind of like Italian food where it's about the quality of the ingredient, right? If you get somebody who's got super quality like espresso, they're putting all the love. They're whisking that guy, right? You know what I'm talking about? What's that spot? The guy over in Denver who does when he was doing the mochas for us. He'd like throw in the espresso mixed with the mocha. Then he'd whisk. Then he'd drop the cream in and steam. He had some ridiculous voodoo.
Denver, right?
If you go and order a coffee and behind it looks like some sort of like steampunk factory,
Yes.
Some sort of like alchemical
right?
experiment.
And the barista's back there like with a like thick robe on and glasses with like binoculars on him, and he's whisking stuff, and I was always like, yeah, you see all this alchemy going on. You know you're about to get some awesome coffee.
Yeah, but it's okay to walk out of that coffee shop if you walk up to the counter and you order a drink and they scoff at you or they correct your order. Kind of like that one time we were in Vancouver and you walked up and ordered a Breve, which is not a drink, it's an ingredient.
Right.
And the guy was like, oh, Breve what, dude?
Yeah, Breve what?
And I was like, first off, sir, thanks for correcting my friend because I've told him for years Breve is an ingredient, not a drink.
We
But
just forget.
secondly, that's super rude, and nobody's rude to my friends. Only I get to be rude
Right.
to my friends.
So I remember that guy, and I actually continue to go into that restaurant and order it the same way.
It is still very tasty.
I'm
Their
like, "What's this
coffee
guy?"
is very good.
Yeah, can I get a Breve? And he's like, Breve what? I'm like, you don't remember from yesterday?
What about an hour ago?
Like, you're supposed to know my
We
drink.
go pretty much like two or three
Two or
times
three
a
times
day
a day.
once we're in.
I do it anyway, just because I'm like trying to be a little like
Be a little saucy.
Yeah, I'm a little sassy. You see what you say. So it doesn't bother me. I kind of like when they're sassy, and I know they care.
But yeah, I mean, part of the like, I think that's another reason why the Breve fits. That's our culture, is because when you go get a coffee, the reality is you can with a couple $100 of equipment make a very comparable level like latte at home, right? A little bit of like YouTube videos and like one of those like single boiler like steamers, you can make yourself pretty much a latte, right? And it'll be 8 out of 10 of what you'd get at like a fancy coffee shop. It'll get you close enough. It'll get you in the ballpark. But you go, one, for the convenience, but two, for the experience, right? Of having somebody else make it with this really cool machinery, who knows what they're doing, who can tweak it however you want. If you're like, oh, can I have more foam? They know exactly how to do that. If you're like, oh, make it a little less sweet for me, they know how to do that, right?
Right.
And they know all these tweaks. They know the full formula, and they know where they can plug and play in that formula. And so you go for the experience. And I think for us, that's a part of our culture too, right?
Yes.
Like
It
the
matters to
results
us.
of your training are awesome, and that is a goal, right? Getting that trick or getting that skill or improving as a whole. But the process of getting there needs to be an experience as well, right? And that's part of the fun, is being there and watching other people also do that process, and going to your coach and them knowing the formula of how you get there and where you can plug and play. If you're like, hey, I want my backflip to be more stylized, what do I do, right? Your coach knows, oh, here's the backflip formula. Here's where you can plug and play cool things to make it your own, right? And that's the same thing with like coffee culture, with Breve culture.
Yeah.
In a coffee shop, is like you get to make that coffee your own, right? You guys have your
There's some alchemy.
you guys
there.
have your Breve vanilla latte.
Right, it's just the easiest one for them too not to mess up. It gives me a
That's
little bit of
true.
flavor, and it's like if I go
And then
Breve,
mostly
I'm
it's-
getting vanilla.
but-
I'm getting something, but it's not.
Well, sometimes it's like sometimes they have like those the bourbon vanilla aged in some weird wood and
Barrel,
it's
yeah.
this
Like
is
blessed by
too
elven
much.
druids.
Like lavender, dude. I can't stand lavender lattes.
Really, the lavender
Do
lattes.
not want to chew on a leaf
At least
with milk mixed in. It's just no.
belong in there.
I'm just not into lavender on
No.
in stuff in general.
But
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 also, there's also a parallel too with
and
that
this is the
Breve
actual
culture.
bush.
Is that the coffee shop aesthetics? There's always a cool coffee shop out there that has the same design aesthetic. That's like, it has nothing to do with the coffee, but they're growing moss on the wall and they're at brick or they have metal and steel, and that's also the culture that I like too.
The
Is
character.
visiting different coffee shops and seeing their design, and that mirrors the gym relationships too. When we go out, we love appreciating other gyms' aesthetics. We have always been inspired by Forge, right? Their
Hey,
gym,
Forge is
they're
cool.
Super,
But any
modern
gym
design.
we go to, we look at it, I see a little bit of subtlety, and like, oh, we could add an element like that.
Yep.
Let's do
Yep.
something like that. And
Yeah.
so I think that would be cool. That's what I really like about parkour gyms, is there's really an opportunity for that. If we could somehow break through like the glass ceiling that is, well, that doesn't always matter to every gym's culture, but for us, I like it. And if we were to do multiple gyms, I think we'd want them to have their own character and be
Yeah.
different, right? In that way.
Yeah, Tempest is really good at that too.
Yeah.
Define their locations almost by their obstacles.
Yeah, and so we have that subtlety as well. So that's I think really travel drives that, but that's a little bit of insight into our culture, and then you got to ask yourself, what you appreciate about your training, and then make that about you a little bit. We've never really been able to chase stuff other than our own, but in order to really thrive in that way, you have to start to really analyze and think about what it is that really makes you happy, that you like about your culture and your training. And it took us a while to figure out that that's kind of what Breve culture was, but it's sort of like, that whole process, it's sort of...
Yeah, not everybody needs like an icon or a catchphrase, if you will, like a title for their culture. You know what I mean? It certainly helps if you're a business and you want to be able to communicate your culture, then you kind of need to be able to label it. But if it's just you and your friends like training, you don't need to label that. And if you do want to label that, don't force it.
Right.
Like, we didn't sit around at a round table and be like, all right, guys, let's come up with something for our culture, right? Like, a dude on an Amtrak train was the one that gave it to us for the most part. And then we expanded on that because we were like, that's funny. We like that, right? Let it come naturally. Like, your culture, if you truly do have a culture that is unique in its own sense, it will eventually make itself known to you if you're just looking out for it, right? So if you're just looking for the opportunity, eventually it's just going to pop out there and be like, hey, I'm here. And then you're like, I recognize that because that's my culture.
And if
that's
you step back And this is really good. So maybe the biggest thing that someone could gain from this episode, in my opinion, is we have a lot, like, it's like how to name your parkour crew. You know what I mean? And there are different layers of that, but I oftentimes run into people who are, they're newer, or they've got a group and they're like, oh, we have to come up with our name, our group, and then we have to make videos around it, and then we have to make product around it, and then there's this whole process because they see that happening everywhere else. And so I think the how is really about, the journey and the positive characteristics, or the characteristics you want to express about who you are. So if you're sitting there and trying to come up with a name for your parkour team, or even your movement team, or even your gym, or your gym's identity, is like, don't go to the outside, look at the inside first. The problem is that takes time. We did that definitely with Outrun, but and Outrun absolutely has a culture, but there can be different layers of things, and there can be different facets of it and whatnot. So when we did our exercise for branding for Outrun, we absolutely just talked about what we already had that was the best of us, and taking that approach instead of being like, what's a cool sounding name? We did spend time on the name, but it was 7 years in the making. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, you can't force it. So somebody told me advice in branding, either pick something, if you aren't set on what you want for like a brand or a name to identify with or something like that, it's like you have to stick with the absolute worst name. So you have to change it at some point. Don't let it be something that like you could kind of settle into and people are like, oh, that's those guys, right? Right, exactly. So you pick something that's horrible as a placeholder, or you don't name it until you feel like you have enough to tell a story. And I think at the center of it is the storytelling of the culture in order to be able to identify with it. And other people can relate. Oh yeah, no, I've traveled before. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I do like that. I do like a little bit of finesse. I do like the quality, but I don't want to take things so seriously. Then maybe you're in alignment with our what's at the center of our culture.
And traveling can be an additive to that. That
Yeah.
can be part of that creative process, right? Like I'll be front and center in that I'm not a creative, right? Like creative being like artist, musician, somebody who makes creatives.
Right.
That's not me. You guys know that I'm like very like ABC, maybe an A1, A2, A3, B1, B2,
Just
B3.
more of like a physics approach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I like a little bit more of a scientific approach. So that's not me. But when it comes to designing, like when we talked about the brand, right? Like I was able to pull on my experience of traveling to other gyms, of training with a wide variety of different parkour athletes, or just athletes in general, and being like, oh, I get like there was this culture at this gym that maybe was like a football gym, right? Where they're an indoor football in Iowa, right? And I'm like, I really liked the atmosphere that I felt in there. I'm not even a football guy. What was it, right? And so like being able to traveling and going to these different places and seeing other athletes from different sports and from your own allows you to pull from different cultures and see and experience like what was it that they did right that I want, right? One here that's here in town in Fort Collins is Beautifully Savage, boxing gym, right? Like none of us, we don't box. Well, you have experienced boxing, and my mom boxes me all the time every holiday.
Yeah.
But for
enough
the
to
most
know
part,
I don't like to get hit in the head.
yeah. But we reference their stuff a lot because we really liked their brand, right? And you went in and took classes, and you were like, oh, this is really awesome, like, right? And so
Yeah, it reflected the experience. Like it wasn't like there was a facade on the website, and then you go in, and the experience there is totally different. The tone resonated through the experience there.
Yeah,
and that's important.
So that's sort of like traveling to other places to train with other people or just to experience other gyms or cultures can be a very important part of defining your own culture.
And also when you travel together, like let's say you have a team, that's one of the best ways. So again, if you're looking to, I'm trying to get some utility out of this for folks. If you one part is understanding us, but then the other part is understanding how you would do something similar. And I think that is travel can really put the lens on the culture of how you work together as a group. And I only really have positive experiences of us traveling together. Like I remember them being very good and sort of think fondly of them. And then if you can sort of identify what those fond things are, then you can sort of help to build a culture around that. So step one, identify who makes up your culture And then step 2, start to be a little bit of an anthropologist about that and start to look at, what is it that's unique about us? What is it we would want to carry forward, and what would we like to get rid of? You know what I mean? Don't force it, because sometimes your weaknesses are what makes it's the kind of quirky things that make up who you are, right?
Your solutions to said weaknesses.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay focused on the positives.
Yeah, we say on pod. Yeah, right, exactly. But I'm just thinking you just don't ignore, don't force it, don't ignore stuff. Just again, empty the cup, let it show up, and then you can kind of say, oh, okay, cool, that's unique about us. Instead of just trying to pick like a name that just sounds cool, it's much easier to be more creative and ask and look at the attributes that you already have. Then spend some time together. I'm not saying it's impossible to come up with a brand without any sort of history, but you have to draw on some kind of history, right? I mean, what are you trying to communicate with your brand, with your team? Are you guys just trying to have a good time? Okay, let it arise. Oh, you guys want to do work? You want to do some projects for people? Okay, then you need to have that kind of slant. And then just like, Outrun is the brand of our gym, and then we sort of have, Breve culture is sort of boiled up or foamed up within that as just sort
Aerated.
of an origin story. What is it?
Aerated.
Aerated. It's aerated in that as an origin story and in a deeper aspect of culture that's not so serious. It's just complementary. You can have a couple, but just understand what you're trying to communicate within that. It would take most people a while to understand that or connect with that. I think who train with us, but
Don't. In other words, like a short one for like Gen Z and other younger millennials.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pick your gamer tag too fast.
Oh yeah, pick a horrible one.
Like, pick a really bad one, so that you change it later.
YZ 200426 whatever,
So
you know
don't
what I
be
mean?
telling people. But
Right.
like, don't be like Shadow Dragon 1319. Like,
Right.
Don't that's taking yourself too seriously.
Let it come.
Just let it flow. If you play games to have fun, name your gamer tag something fun and goofy that when people see, they'll chuckle about. If you are trying to be a professional, pick a professional name. Shadow Dragon 1239 is not like a professional thing that like you want people shouting.
Right.
Hey, that guy Shadow Dragon 1239. Oh my gosh, right? Like you don't want people shouting that. So like in the similar vein that you would pick that, like define what it is. What is your goal for your culture? Is it to just have fun and enjoy the movement, or is it a more business venture? In which case, it needs to be professional, and then kind of start moving in that direction, And it's okay to like have fun. Like not everything needs to be, a businessy venture. And even fun. There's a ton of fun brands out there that then pivoted to become businessy ventures, if that's the goal, right? But they started out just wanting to be fun. So
Yeah, and you also have to I think, as somebody who's understanding language. Oftentimes, when you think about brand, it really needs to make sense. Like when we were thinking about Outrun, like it was more. So there's two types, right? Because Outrun was selected because it was very clear when you think Outrun, it could be a parkour brand. Breve Lords might not have made any sense as a parkour brand. It really doesn't, and the fact that it doesn't is why culturally it's interesting in that facet. And that sort of extends outside of, I think you were talking about when you do your design, using Breve in your design blog that you were talking about, your product research blog.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and following that culture. But again, because the finesse
have you
and the
started
style
that yet?
aspect.
Because I need a desk. I need like a side table desk. So I'm wondering if you
Oh.
have side table desks on your blog that I can look at.
Yeah, I have plenty of side tables.
Nice.
How many of them are under
None of them.
$600?
No. Okay. All right. So this is not an affordable brand product review. Justin told us last episode that he's working on a side project of doing product review, and he's going to select some products. It sounds like they may be out of our price range mostly, but that's cool. Still cool to look at.
Yep, it's
That's
cool to
the
look
thing.
at.
It's cool to look at.
Yep.
Justin's also been very good about finding very expensive furniture and then being like, I can build that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Just getting inspiration
In fact,
for doing it on a smaller scale.
Colin and I were just talking about that. How I like to look at that, and then I was like, well, I could build that, but it would probably actually end up just taking me way more time than it's worth to just save up and spend the money.
Yeah.
And I was like, and while building is definitely like a labor of love, I'm an efficient man, so sometimes I just want to buy it, but
and again, it's back to loving the process. So if you have that feeling of like, oh, there's something I want, okay, and then you're ready to settle in and like start building this entire project, it's just like you better want to do it. I feel like that's not a type of procrastination, but it's definitely an approach that doesn't work with like testing faster. So I was working with a lot of Silicon Valley companies for software in the past. We would talk about doing faster iterative testing and doing these MVPs, these minimum viable products, and testing things quicker. But the lesson to be learned with that is just you do have to be patiently impatient, because if you find something you like, then getting sort of drunk on the idea of getting ready to do it and never actually doing it is something that people get stuck in. So if you're talking about a brand or something like that, you have to, or an identity or a culture, you have to start working on that right away in little chunks that are manageable, right? So don't like, oh, I could build that. I feel like that's a common like Midwestern characteristic that I had with a lot of like friends or family in the Midwest, is be like, oh, it's very, you like, oh, look at this thing. Like they wouldn't like to buy expensive things if they thought they could build it.
But then they never built it.
But then you never build it. You're like, oh, I've been working on that. It's my shop for like years. The dude's like 70. And you're like, oh gosh, if this is any forecast of the need to test things faster, then I think you got to figure that out earlier. Same thing with your culture. Don't kick stuff on the road too far. Try and start to catalog what it is that you're doing early on. Usually through video, one of the best ways to do it, and then you go from there.
And I think if you want a more actionable thing where you're making small chunks, everybody has like a note-taking app on their phone, right? Regardless of what OS you're using. And when you're out training or moving with your crew, try and keep track of the things that you guys say that come up over and over again, right? One, this is really good because if you keep noting things like, "Oh, so and so jokes about how I suck at jumping," then you can also be like, "Oh, that's not a thing we want." Right? We don't want to be like tearing each other down. But sometimes there's just funny sayings that you guys have that you don't notice because you say them all the time, right? And you don't know that that's a part of your culture. Yeah. Those sayings are a part of your culture. And if you start noting those, like when Justin's saying something and I'm like, oh, wait, that's a unique thing. Pop open your phone, make a note of it, and then eventually you'll have a long list of like these goofy or fun or productive sayings or colloquialisms that your crew has that you can then start to put together to get an idea of what your culture is and what to name it, know? And I think that's a huge thing, because like if I were to ask you guys right now, what's an English colloquialism off the top of your head, you'd be like, because I'm right now trying to come up with one, right? But I would guarantee you before we walk out of the gym today, we will have said one. Oh, that if we said it, that if you translated it into another language, they'd be like, huh?
Yeah.
What is that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, there are definitely terms that are common to your group, your crew, your squad, or whatnot. So
everybody's got them.
Everybody's got them. Figuring out what they are and just kind of own them, because that's how language works, and there's so much transferred in uppy downy.
Yeah.
So there's some inside stuff, right? You can just like get those inside jokes that you guys all get, that only someone in the circle would understand. Hitting those notes with your culture, and then bringing other people in on them is part of building a culture. So I think that the quick urge to build a brand and to build an identity and things like that, which really aren't, there's just the experience of training with each other, or training at your gym, or training in that, being in that space is really all that's there. So don't try and force it, but at the same time, when you want to tell that story, you need to take the time to look around. Stop trying to make it up and just look around and see what's going on around you. And you know what? If you realize that that's not that great, well, then you got a problem, right?
But at least
why are you perpetuating something that's not that great?
Well, and now you're aware of it, right?
Yes, and you can change it.
Now you can change it. But if you weren't aware of it, you weren't able to change it. So
exactly. So I think that's a really good tip. Brand names for people. I think that you were talking about the name being not great. That's really like specific, like Veloso Dragon 2323 or whatever. Actually, that one's not that bad. But
it's kind of funny.
Veloso Dragon? Yeah. You were like, what's a Veloso Dragon? like a dragon, but it's a rat. Well, those are kind of dragons. All right, I gotcha. Okay, so coming up with
Spark
these
conversation though. See?
it sparks a conversation. Exactly. Sometimes,
like,
sometimes you want something to be kind of jarring. You don't really want it to always make instant sense. It doesn't cause.
Reminds me of Dirt Nubs.
Dirt Nubs, dude. It's a gamer tag.
It's a gamer tag.
He was a guy we played with.
Legend.
Yeah, he was
years ago.
Good.
Yeah,
he was good, and we were very impressed with Dirt Nubs.
Yeah,
but see, like
what is
Dirt Nubs?
No, it's so weird. It sticks in your head. So you got that. I think the Breve Lords is on one side where it's like you're telling the story, and then when you understand it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. I think Outrun's a little easier to understand. It's like you're outrunning, you're faster, there's run in it. It's easy for kids. The vocabulary is like very basic. Outrun is not like a college level word that you aren't going to encounter. It's sticky, and it's also a little bit specific to what we do. Outrun is probably not like a legal agency. Well, it's like unless you're like for fugitives, maybe.
Yeah.
Outrun bonds, right? That would be good. But yeah, so you think a little bit about that. Keep it simple, keep it flexible sometimes, and then think about your audience. It is tough to come up with these names, but I think basic rules are like, don't make it so obscure unless you want it to be like obscure. If it has a background story, it makes some sense. But
and you're always going to be more sensitive to the title of your culture, your brand, than other people are.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's true.
Like if you had been like, I'm going to make my brand Apple.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, for what's your industry? Agriculture?
Mm-hmm.
Computers? Okay, run that by me just one more time.
Yeah.
Apple? Right? But it makes total sense. Everybody else just takes it in stride now. They're like, when you say, I have an Apple computer, they're like, oh yeah, I know it. Yeah, I know. It's a Mac. Yeah. So you're always going to be more sensitive and like volatile in reaction to the brand name than other people are.
Right.
And don't get too hung up on that. You want to like it, of course, but sometimes it's okay to be like, you know what, this is cool. I think other people may not understand it all the way, but they're not going to dislike it. Right. That's a pretty common thing too, is being overly critical about things and not being able to separate yourself from your customers' view or from just outside people viewing your brand.
The cultural view, right.
And
exactly.
that's when you try too hard to make something that like is
Don't
going to have the
force it.
same emotional reaction with everybody.
You can't force it. And oftentimes you get really excited about an idea and then like no one else is excited about it. That still matters. So
That's right.
two things have happened. Like your idea is really not that good and you just think it is, which happens all the time. Or you just have a failure to communicate the vision or the story, or get people to understand what the origin is and why it makes sense. And then you have to do work to show that. And I feel like that's really where we have been with Outrun too. Is we have to show people the culture and show people what it's about, and then they get, oh, okay, now I get it. It makes a little more sense. So that's good if you're trying to come up with your own brand. I think we maybe do another episode at some point about just logos. I think that how to make a logo for your brand or whatever is a process we went through, and we could use Outrun as a way to explain that at some point. I think that would be another cool topic that people would enjoy, because I think a lot of people want to find a way to identify, even if you're just identifying with your own like name or you have your own project or whatever. That's really helpful, good information. Yeah. But as far as travel goes, to sort of like wrap that up, what do you guys feel for travel was like your most impactful travel experience?
As related to work?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about how the impact that, like, if we look at through the lens of culture and Breve culture and the Breve Lords and that identity, we talk about that one of the trip where sort of that started to form, right? The culture started to form and that'd be more of an identity that was fun to associate with, but the act of traveling, that was for like the Breve Lords. No, that was that backstory. But for you guys individually, what was sort of like a defining travel moment for you personally?
I don't know if India was definitely, that was an intense one.
Okay, India. So what happened there?
Well, our stepfather was born and raised in India, and so we went there when my mom and our stepdad got married. And it's definitely like, if you've never been to a developing world country, it's
Culture shock?
It's culture shock for sure, but it definitely coming from like, northern Colorado to the population density. Like the population density, like imagine all of the major cities in northern Colorado condensed into like
A city
the
block?
square footage of Fort Collins.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that might actually still not be quite right as to what Chembur in Mumbai was. And so it's something so, it's impactful, not in there's a stereotypical way of like, oh my gosh, we're so like blessed to live in America. And that's true. We are very fortunate to like have hit the jackpot to be born and raised and
there's
conduct
an
our
element
business
of
in
luck
America.
there, for sure.
Yeah, there's huge. I mean, statistically, you have more chance of being born outside of the U.S. than in the U.S.
Yeah.
But I think what was the most impactful for me about it was that it's amazing what other people will live and do and be okay with. Because if you took anybody in the U.S., with the exception of a very few special individuals, and you were to put them in the livelihood of those individuals, they'd be like, I quit. This is unacceptable. I have to share a bedroom with my brother and his wife, and that's just weird. And then I have to and we also have a goat in here. I don't know I have a goat, but he is getting milk in the
Coming
morning.
from Iowa, like I'm kind of used to the goats being around. But
right?
yeah.
So special exception. but like it's so amazing what and they're not sad. It's not like, I won't speak for all of them.
Right.
But they're like, no, this is my life and I'm happy. Like I have the things that I need.
There's just a cultural difference.
There's just a cultural difference, and I think that to me was really cool to be like, sometimes it's okay to just like to suffer a little bit, for lack of a better term, and to be like, you can be happy while suffering. You know what I mean? The suffering is obviously not actual suffering, but you're just like, yeah, like I work a lot, or I don't have a ton of money to pay all my bills, but I'm happy because I have enough money to survive. And I don't know, it was very interesting to me to interact in that culture and see those people and how they live. And just know that there's such a wide diversity across the globe of how people can live and still be happy, right? I mean, there's like that happiness quotient that people will talk about, and of course the like happiest countries are like in the middle of Africa. And they're like, yeah, they have like a hut and they hunt. They're a very hunter-gatherers type of lifestyle, and they're content.
Yeah,
right?
It's because it has that. There's that film or whatever where they introduce the Coke bottle, the empty Coke bottle, to an indigenous people, and then this chaos ensues because so much of happiness has a relationship with desire and acceptance. And so it's this very good observation, and you feel like that contrast was what you learned. Travel gave you that contrast. You wouldn't have been able to experience and have that experience and learn that without it, right? So there you go. And was there parkour?
A little bit, not much.
Jumped on some stuff.
It's very hard to jump on things when there's like 300 people around you at all times.
Okay.
Like it was not.
Couldn't jump.
It was not quarantine friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot of space to jump around.
Yeah, and also you're like hitting a precision in somebody's window, and they're like, "Hey, get off my."
Yeah, you're also maybe like hitting a precision in somebody's trash.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Don't want to tear it up.
It was fun though. We'd go back. Kind of want to go back, but. What about you?
You can't use that one, even though you were there.
Yeah, you can't use that one.
Oh no, I think mine was the month-long road trip with the Apex team.
So people don't know, there was, what was the series called? Was there a series? There was a series, but what was the name?
Right?
The Pro Tour?
Yeah, Apex Pro Tour.
Yeah, Apex Pro Tour, and this happened in
was the second
2012,
Yep.
13, 2012?
2012.
2012. The OG Apex crew traveled to
like it
4 or
was
5
later.
cities?
Maybe it's 20. No, I think the first one was 2011.
2011. So
2012. I don't remember how many cities we went to.
It was a blur.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
and so who was on that trip?
That was Ryan, me,
Ryan Ford, Amos,
Dylan Baker,
Baker.
Jake Smith, Amos, and Dudley. who also
doing
went to us.
the film stuff. Dudley also went with us to
during
to
the
the
Breve
West Coast.
Rose.
Mhm.
Yep.
trip. Yeah.
So yeah,
Good
that was
part in
that was quite the experience. I had never been away that long without any family members or friends from high school or
How old
college.
were you at that time?
So that was 19.
19.
20 maybe.
Okay.
20. I was 20.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So,
So,
yeah.
you're out with adults, traveling.
With people like I knew everyone there. I'd spent almost 5 years knowing all of those people, but it was like once, I only saw them once a week or once every other week. It wasn't like it was my best friend or traveling with Jesse or traveling with any of my family members. It was people who I just didn't know that well, but I had trained with, and so living with people in a van and in gyms for a whole month was definitely quite the experience. So definitely did stuff that I just never would have thought I would be brave enough to do, and filming with people, and getting injured in the middle of the trip. So
What was your injury in the middle of the trip?
my neck injury.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That stuck with you.
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Flyweight full into a foam pit, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
we share that. We share our deepest traumas for
Yeah.
injury in association with the foam pit.
But yeah, I mean, it was just
Man.
a blast. I mean, seeing and getting to see all these other athletes from all that from the East Coast was just crazy. You always see videos of people jumping.
It was like
ridiculously
your first
far.
time meeting like Max Henry, right?
Yep, yeah, that's where I met Max. Where I met Mish.
Yep.
And yeah, just
So that and Misha's Quebec,
I
Ontario.
think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
French Canadian athlete who was very big. One of the
What was
first
he known for?
big athletes that really made people think, oh,
Yeah.
big people can do parkour too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's big, like 6 foot whatever, and
He's like
muscles,
6'2"
right?
or
Yeah, he's
something
huge.
Like that. He's-
He strides the entire length of the building like a monster for sure. And then the original Apex guys, and then more Apex guys with that. Okay, so then that was just profound because you grew during that time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, parallel parked a van in New York in Manhattan
Oh, there you go.
That was a
without
learning
hitting
experience.
anything.
At
That was pretty
19.
good. Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
it was quite the experience for sure. It was a blast. So
And quite the training catalyst, I remember.
oh yeah.
Like Justin left, and I stayed here obviously to handle like classes and the startup
Yeah.
the business.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's right.
And he came back definitely a better athlete.
Oh,
like
you saw
what you
that,
would
yeah.
expect in a logical progression of a month,
Mhm.
right? Like there was definitely 6 months to a year's worth of progress
Development.
condensed into that 1 month for Justin when he came back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was like readily noticeable for everybody else to be like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy came back and like he just went through the crucible
Mhm.
and came back. It's definitely something better.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
And you have that, like, that's another part of travel. So if you're younger, you're going to travel. We had, like, another young student, Levi, has been talking about travel and was interrupted by COVID, I think, but he had the intention of going to Japan to train. And I just strongly encourage that when you're at the right age, if it's a safe environment, I think late teens, early 20s is a great time to do that. I think you need to do it to grow, to observe contrast, to push yourself, to feel what it's like to be alone. And lots of times you can simulate, like, I grew up when I was like 16, 15, 16, I started like kind of helping support my family and stuff. But you don't have to go through that kind of trauma. You can just like go away for a while and be responsible for yourself. Mom's not doing laundry, the food isn't just on the table, and like people are going to pick stuff up for you, and you kind of have to find even how to be not lonely when you're away from home. And then still be able to chase after. Oftentimes having those goals helps that, right? If you're just out there and you have no reason, that's tough. But if you can go because you're training and that's always on your mind, but I'm going to meet this, I'm going to level up, I'm going to achieve this skill, or I'm going to have this experience and this intention behind it, the intention matters so much. It can get you through a ton, having that focus and that intention. For me, I've already talked about it, but obviously going to China was the big one for me. That was my first time. I just got out of high school. It was my first time on a plane. I'd never been on a plane.
Dang.
And I'd never been outside of the surrounding states of Iowa, which is basically like never being outside of Iowa.
Yeah,
Like I'd
it's
been to
kinda like
Chicago. Yeah, and it was like,
Iowa and then Iowa too.
right, so imagining like what this is going to be like, but I'm just all in. I'm just like, give me the ticket. And it was a one-way ticket. Just bought a one-way ticket. Hop on the plane. Had some flight issues. I got stuck in Japan for a while because of flight stuff, and that interfered
place
with
to get
my.
stuck.
Yeah, it just happens. International travel. It's really easy to like get your schedule off. And then I landed in China at that time, and that was before it was pretty common to travel to China. Like literally, if you're going to China, like there's very few people who are like, oh, I've also been or I'm going or whatever. So at a young age, just showed up there and just pursuing learning while I was there and training with different people and knowing that was there and getting the education was probably where I grew the most. Such a period of acceleration athletically. You go from like, I wasn't like a McDojo kid, but you go from like a pretty, not unathletic, but you go from potential to like some serious leveling up. It's very good. So I would suggest.
And if I recall in the China story, you lost your passport.
Yes.
And the police actually found it on the side of the road and called you, like a week before your flight or something like that. They were like, hey, we have your passport. It was on the side of the road. And that you'd never actually received your passport.
No, right? I had my visa in it too. So it was like it's just a really weird, miraculous story. But my young naiveness, I'm just like, I'm going to China. I got my ticket. So at that time, I went to an agency in China in Chinatown because it was cheaper. So I actually drove to Chinatown, and then in the the cultured streets, the dusty streets of Chinatown, Chicago, in this like back alley agency, got like a cheaper one-way ticket. There's a paper ticket, so I'm holding on to that ticket. And then I'd sent off for a visa, which comes from China, and then that had gotten lost. Someone stole the mail, tore it open, and left the passport in the downtown city. And then I was like 2 weeks out. I'm like, man, I don't have my passport and my visa. That'll show up in time. They got to know that I'm traveling. And then the police just called me like, hey, we found a passport. Is it yours? We found it downtown in the rain, right? Like a cabbie had picked it up on the side of a street in a storm. Like, real, yeah. And they call me and they give it to me, and then I get out there, I get on the plane, and I take the one-way trip, and I'm just gone. And showed up with no real plans. I was a 19-year-old, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just sure I was going to be fine. The intention was there, but the planning wasn't there. So after everything got mixed up, like I showed up in China at like 2 a.m, just like no idea where to go, loose idea. Go to the school.
So not the recommended way to travel.
Heck no.
But you're better
but the best
because
way.
of it. So
That's your job.
Yeah, that's good.
We're getting the cue for time here, so we're gonna wrap up. And
this would work.
Send you off.
So I mean those are other episodes for sure. But the bottom line is use travel to build your story. You know what I mean? To understand who you are. Observe the contrast, and then just document your journey, and then you'll have a better understanding of how to tell that story, and then you can find your Breve culture, your Outrun culture, your defining moment,
your uniqueness.
Yeah, your uniqueness,
for lack of a better term.
Yep. All right, you guys. You hungry?
Oh.
What?
Just you. I'm really not that
Travis
hungry.
gets hungry on travel a lot too.
You eat like 5 meals a day.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it. Let us know your travel stories. Comment, share. We would love to hear about your experiences as well. And we will see you next time.